Good evening, ladies and gents, mostly gents, I've got to say. Just a quick straw poll. How many people, this is going to be by way of almost second sitting. We talked extensively with Kevin. He's gone through everything, his whole career, and pretty much everything I could think of to talk to him about. He's happy to talk, brilliant at talking. But how many people were sat for the first sitting? How many people came in afterwards? I know we started quite early. Yeah, but you're a geek, so you'll sit through it again, doesn't matter about you. Right, so basically, what we're going to do, we'll get Kevin up. It'll be a shorter chat, because we've done plenty already. He's been sat there, manfully going through, autographing everybody's things he brought. But we'll get him up, we'll do what we're going to do. We'll do half an hour. If you've got a question, stick your hand up. We'll send Ross to find you, because we're not going to have so long afterwards. Because I know Kevin's got to get off, and I've got to get off afterwards. So probably sometime after 8 we'll finish. So please welcome onto the stage. For me, I've said this before, and I truly believe it. I was privileged to sit on the same grid as this man. I would say I was privileged to race with him, but it never got to that because he was better than me. But I did sit on the same grid. Probably one of the most talented riders ever to sit on a motorbike. Please welcome Kevin Schwantz. You were some rows in front of me at the time, but I was still privileged to be on the same grid. I remember my first ever 500 GP. I was standing in for a bloke called Simon Bookmaster on one of those Harris things that was at the time reasonably good, and I was trying to find my way around Magna Carta, and you came past me on the back straight, and I was shocked at how long you could not look at where you were going doing 180 miles an hour, because you were just looking like that. Anyway.
It's like that's Jamie Whitham.
Who is that? That's what you're thinking. Who doesn't know where he's going? We're gonna have less chat. We're gonna be maybe half an hour in, because then obviously we've got places to be. So, like I said, if you've got a question to ask, stick your hand up. We'll send Ross to come and find you.
I actually got my. You know what? My favorite thing to do was when somebody got my way on the lap, is ride by them and then just shake my head. At Suzuki the other day, I heard some bikes coming, and I had just come out of the pits on new tires. So as I got to the hairpin, I want to call everything the old hairpin, don't I? As long as it makes a sharp corner. Anyway, at Suzuki, get to the hairpin corner, and I hear them coming. So as I come out, I kind of hurry into the corner and hurry out. I just go mid-track, because there's a chicane coming up, and that gives whoever's coming behind me 2 different ways to get around. You know, if I go outside, they probably follow me. If I go to the middle, you know, you got a couple options. And this guy.
What was he?
You know, I don't know. He was riding for the French Yamaha team, and I don't think it was David Checa. But anyway, he came by, and I'm like, where is he? And when he came by, he had his head shaking, and I was like, I did everything I could to get out of your way. I didn't just stop. I didn't pinch you one way or the other. I gave you both sides of the racetrack.
Did he actually know who you were? I'm thinking not.
Yeah, I think he probably did. I probably shook my head at him one day.
That's not allowed, though, if you don't mind me saying. You can't shake it at Kevin Schwantz, or any of you boys back then. First question then. I'll ask people out there, what favourite time to watch Grand Prix? Mine was right in the middle of your career, the V4, 2 strokes, 120, 130 kilos, and 170, 180 brake horsepower. Not the easiest thing to ride, no electronics. It was just a bloke on a bike that if you let it, it would hurt you in a really big way. That's my favourite era. I don't know what yours is. You tend to remember the era that you were in your prime as being the best. But do you feel privileged to have been part of something that I reckon is looked back on now, certainly by me and a lot of my mates, has been a kind of halcyon period of GPs when you could understand the bikes. They were dangerous, but no electronics, no split classes, just blokes on scary motorbikes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You used to watch guys win 250 championships and then come around at 500. As a 500 rider, you didn't worry about those guys for a couple of years, because if they survived the 2 years that it took for them to learn how to ride one, typically they were beat up enough. It took them another year or so to get going fast on them. But yeah, it was a great time for racing, American-wise. You know, we thought we ruled the world. Since then, we've learned otherwise. But you know, myself and Rainey and Lawson, and then the Australians, and then a couple of English all 3 English teammates that I had. McKenzie was a fill-in for McGee, but you know, Rob Mack and Ron Haslam. You know, and I give a lot of credit to Rob, one, for not killing me, and second of all, you know, showing me the ropes. You know, he showed my dad and myself all the way around Europe, where to go, where the tracks were, how to get in and out, what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
How to steal diesel, probably.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure, but it was probably a trick that he taught me. But anyway, it was you know, we finished races, whether it was in Assen on Saturday or whether it was anywhere else on Sunday, and we all hung around Sunday night. We went out and had a feed with the team, whether we won or whether we lost, and then it was straight to the bar. And 9 times out of 10, you'd see the 2 or 3 or 4 of us, the big rivals. We'd all end up in the same bar. We'd all end up telling stories, and we didn't normally end up in fights, at least not with each other. So it was a time that I think Grand Prix racing was really special, because as competitors, it was easier for us just to travel as a big group, you know. And if we were going from race to race, week to week, you know, there'd be 3 or 4 motorhomes all jump together, and transporters, and you might follow the team and all stop at the same place if it was a full day and then some trip. And you know, it was a lot of fun. It was almost like family, but it's amazing how separated that family could get on Sunday when we all put our helmets on. You know, we all wanted to win and didn't like getting beat by anybody.
And that was particularly the Americans. I mean, from what I saw, a little bit from the outside, I mean, I did know you a little bit before, but from the outside it looked like the only thing that mattered to you and a couple of other Americans was beating the other Americans.
Yeah, I mean, one specific, and that's Wayne Rainey. You know, my life revolved around whether I beat him last week, whether I got sleep all week or all 2 weeks, or whether it was through the end of a season, the end of the next winter, depended on whether I got the better of him or not. You know, I'd get the better of him on some weekends, but I didn't get the better of him until the very end of his career, when I finally won a championship. And you know, Wayne made my life, you know, for lack of better words, living hell. Whenever I'd lose, and it was until there was another chance to try and beat him, to redeem myself. And you know, sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes it seemed like months without sleep. It may not have been actual without sleep, but I never was very rested, for sure.
When did that start? When did the whole Rainey Schwantz thing start? Way before GP?
Yeah, when we started competing against each other, yeah, I think probably even before we competed against each other. When I was riding Superbikes in '86, we went to Daytona, then we came to the match races, and Fred Merkel and I and all the rest of the Americans, Wayne couldn't come because he crashed a Yamaha testing it and had a broken collarbone. So we come over here, and now everybody's talking about Schwantz and Merkel and all these, and I'm getting Grand Prix rides, and you know, Wayne's like, I've been doing this for years and I haven't got a 500cc Grand Prix ride. You know, he's like, you get things, and I only ever read what I think he said that probably irritated me most about him, and that was that I didn't deserve what I got. And I'm like, oh, what is there, did you have to deserve about it? I've got a ride, I'm winning races, you know, what else is there to do? So, you know, I think he didn't feel like I had to go through all the proper channels.
Paid your dues kind of thing.
Yeah, that I hadn't been, you know, that I hadn't seen the long and the short and the hard of how difficult it can be to get where I'd gotten. And, you know, that's anything but the truth. Yeah, I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, but there was by no means that I'd take any super shortcuts and do anything that he didn't have to do to get there. And by the way, if he wanted to switch and ride the Suzuki, I would have let him.
Do you think, I asked you this earlier, do you think that he had certainly the more rider-friendly of the bikes? From the outside, the Yam seemed, if you want to choose a bike to go and do 500 GPs on at that time, you wouldn't have chose your Suzuki. It looked lovely, but it didn't look as easy to ride as what the Yamaha did.
You know, it's tough to say. I could have gone and ridden a Yamaha, may have never gotten along with it. They may have said, here's the way you ride the bike, and you know, this is the setup that we run in it. But you know, that was different at Suzuki. I'd been there since they started Grand Prix racing again in '87, and I think they built the bike around what it is that I wanted or what I needed or what I asked for. You know, maybe that's why none of my teammates could get along with it, because maybe I built something that was completely unrideable. And yeah, I tried to go ride a Yamaha at the end of '89, and I tried to put together a deal to ride a Honda at the end of '91. And neither one came to fruition. So, yeah, I stayed at Suzuki, and you know, now that it's all said and done, I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, because you know more than anything now as a Suzuki man from you start your road race career to the very end.
As they're about to go back Grand Prix racing and have me with no involvement in it, you know, I really don't feel like a Suzuki man, though.
I was privileged to be involved at that time, and I'd say that I hurt myself a lot on the 500s, and I wasn't ever able to ride it properly. But do you think people understand how... What I found about them is that they were perceived as bikes that only superhuman people could ride, but they weren't. When I first got on them, the first lap you think, well, this is alright, this has got loads of torque, it's not scary, it's doing what I want, it's going where I want. For me, it was just the last half second that you needed, and when they bit you, it was worse than ever crashing it. They always seemed to hurt you more than what a superbike did that had crashed quite a lot before. Was that the case even at your level?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I tell the story of, you know, people, different riders coming and testing the bike and getting on it, going, oh yeah, no, it's a great bike. Well, how far off the pace was it? Well, it was only 2 seconds off where you caught. In less than a second, a bike can go from being perfect to an absolute unrideable beast. And for me, that's exactly what a 500 was. You know, you could get out if you once. The most difficult thing was understanding the power, where the torque was, how far down you could expect the thing to pull. Low in the RPM, the biggest struggle was to get the gearbox set right. Once you got the gearbox close, it wasn't too bad, but then that last 3/4 or half second were the most difficult to find. And you know, you go out and you ride and do a pretty good lap, you kind of go, yeah, it was before a lap timer, so you had to come in and look at the mechanic's lap board to be able to see what you'd done. And you think, man, I still got to find 2 seconds, and it's like, 2 seconds is an eternity on one of these. So they were really rewarding to ride when you got one close, and you know, that didn't happen a lot throughout my career, but you know, I did ride some bikes that I think were in excess of being 95% perfect. But as a rider, that was the neat thing about that era, was you could ride a motorcycle that may only be 85%, and you could compensate as a rider and try and ride around some of the issues that you had handling-wise. And from start to finish, full of gas to the end, you know, you had 24 liters of fuel. I forget what we used to carry.
24-ish.
24-ish. And how much would a 130-kilo bike change as it burned off 24 liters of fuel? It'd go from being something that was just slamming the front down, hitting the bottom, to something you could cut lap records with at the very end of the race. So there was a big change from start to finish, and as a rider, you tried to adjust early on to try and get the most out of it, and then just try and get it to the end so that at the end you could really ride what was so rewarding.
Why do you think you were, of that era, especially the Americans, that normally had an edge to them, I mean, Lawson, a little bit scowly, a little bit serious, Rainey, unbelievably super focused to the point of kind of unapproachability almost. Why do you think you were as the most popular at that? Certainly in Britain, you were definitely the most popular Yank at the time. I can't figure out whether it was because you went really well at Donington and always sort of picked Donington up, or whether it was because you pushed that hard, you jump off it occasionally, and people always can get on board with that, or whether it was because you kind of said it how it was more than they did and wore it out on your sleeve a little bit.
Yeah, you know, I think I pretty much call it like I see it. You know, whether it was something that made friends or made enemies, I didn't really care, and you know, it was, you know, in the beginning of my career, I thought winning a race meant lapping everybody. You know, I win by a second or two, that's not very much. I didn't beat you very bad, did I? You know, I actually did. I thought at one point, you know what, I'm gonna get the perfect race put together. I'm gonna figure out how to lap everybody, or even better, one year at Donington, it was supposed to rain Friday qualifying. So my guys go, it's supposed to rain this afternoon. Better go out and get a lap in, because if it's wet tomorrow, you know, then you don't have to worry about what happens. And of course, what do I make that in my mind? I make that into, if I can be the only one to go out and get a good lap in, and it's fast enough, I'll be the only one qualified for the Grand Prix. One rider race, that'd be perfect. So, and what did I do? I went out, and on the second lap, I sent myself to the moon going through Craner. Walked back up, hopped the fence, got on the back of the scooter, sat in the paddock, looking at the spare bike, hearing my team say, Kevin, it hadn't rained yet. You still think you got a good lap in you? And I'm trying to figure out which way Donington goes. I'm sitting in the box, which, you know, used to be those boxes that you kind of were hidden in. So I'm sitting there, wow, when I turn out of the garage, do I turn right or do I turn left? I had no idea. And finally I told Stuart, I said, Stuart, just point the thing down pit lane. I'll get it done. Went out and I think I qualified 6th or 7th, and they had the inboard like, Ian, we know what's wrong with your head. Anyway, I was slightly concussed that evening, but I think it all worked out on Sunday.
Did you work with mostly British crew?
Oh, yeah, completely.
And get on with them good?
Yeah. You know,
for the most part.
I like to say the first guy I had, his name is Simon Tong, and Simon was as young and inexperienced at it as I was. And, you know, we'd go into Saturday afternoon qualifying, maybe not have a great bike, and Sunday morning warm-up, he would have changed absolutely everything on the motorcycle. Instead of, you know, making a few small adjustments and let's just try and get the best of this. Instead, let's completely reinvent the wheel and maybe it'll be good, but I don't know. I was always a bit of something, a bit of kick in the confidence when you go, I go, now be careful because I really don't know what this is going to do. And you be like, and it's a 500 Grand Prix bike. Perfect, that's just what I need. But then when we brought Stuart Shenton on board in '92, at the end of '91, Stuart went about things very methodically. You know, it was, we're always going to just make small inroad. We're never going to try and do make a big change and a big jump. We know how hard these things are to ride. We got to work at it little bitty steps, and if we don't get there this weekend, we're going to continue to work on it. We'll get there next weekend. So, a much more realistic way and a much easier way for a rider to learn and get down to some decent lap times, knowing that what you're on isn't a whole lot different than what you rode just last session.
Certainly the safest way of doing it. If you've got a question, don't forget to stick your hand up, because we're not going to be talking as long as what we did the first sitting. So I want to ask you about a couple of these, and you'll probably remember this. I watched every single GP of that era, either if I couldn't watch it because I was racing in British Championship at the time, but I'd get the tapes, I'd watch it whenever I could, and get the motorcourse book and all the rest of it in the MCN. And two moves that I saw then, you know, because I've asked you early on, but if you can remember them, well, if you saw them, you definitely would remember them. One was, both involved your nemesis, Mr. Wayne Rainey. One of them, last lap, next to the last lap at Donington, you dropped it right across the front of him, but you came from about 30 yards behind to do it and beat him. That was, and I was racing at the time, and you had to actually have raced a bike to understand how impossible that was. And the second one was going into the infield, the stadium section at Hockenheim, completely out of control, it looked to me. And again, to beat him, but not only did you get under him and beat him into the stadium section, but you rubbed his nose in it a little bit by kind of doing that, as he'd just gone past him. And that would have pissed me off, never mind. But what do you remember of those?
Well, we talked a little bit about the Germany one earlier, but the one at Donington was, he was really pissing me off because my bike was pretty good the best part of the lap. Getting into the S's, I was rushing into the first part, so that as you started to come off the second part to head down to Melbourne Loop, my bike was already cresting, there's a little crown in the track kind of in the middle. Mine was already starting to crest that little crown, and it'd start moving, and he'd get the Yamaha turned back nice and tight, and just go, rah, 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 and get to the top of the hill, and he'd start stopping. Well, as I'd get over the top of the hill, I'm like, I gotta make up some ground, and I'd catch him, and I'd catch him, and I'd catch him, and he kept moving further inside, and I was just steaming under my helmet. I'm like, you're gonna continue to just ride around and block me. And I remember hearing him and Lawson almost get in a fight in Austria. And they called it, as dirt trackers, we call it pole putting. So you got a bike that's hooked up and pretty good. You don't really ride it real loose and out in the cushion. You keep it on the groove inside. You don't get it too far out of line. You ride around, you pole putt, and typically, unless somebody's really, really a lot faster than you, you're going to win. And I saw him and Lawson almost fight in the back. You know, we did the podium in Austria, and then we had to ride around in the car, and they were at each other, and I was in the middle, and for some reason I tried to keep them apart. I should have antagonized them a little bit and tried to get them to go ahead and fight. But anyway, and I'm thinking inside my helmet, you pole putting, no good, and I'm just cussing at him. And I finally figure out that it's not, I don't need to concern myself with what he's doing in that corner. I need to figure out why I'm not getting off the corner with him. So I slow down a little bit, getting in to what was then a really nice portion of the racetrack called the S's until they changed the name of it to the Foggy S's, and now it's not so good. But anyway, turned it back tight, started to get a better drive off. I'm like, okay. And he moved inside, and I said, you know what? It was like 2 or 3 laps ago. I said, I've got one good shot here, and then I've got another good shot maybe a couple laps later. That'll be the last lap of the race. So I'm just going to give it a try and see what happens. And when I hustled up the outside, and he started to pull in a little bit, he had to slow down his entrance speed a little bit because it was so tight. And of course, that corner's kind of falling away from him. I got in, turned in, and I'm like, you know what, whether you got room or not, I don't care. And I just kind of leaned it on him. And I signed a picture a minute ago, and I chuckled after I signed it because I said, in the process of getting beat right there, wasn't he? But of course, when we finished and got on the podium, he says, my bike had a cracked exhaust pipe. That was what was all wrong. Well, it looked like you had brake problems, what I think you had.
Proper move there.
That was, it was good.
Question. Like I said, we're not going to talk in long, so don't, you're probably not going to get a chance again ever. So.
What's happened to the Americans now?
Yeah, what he said is what's happened to the Americans, like Kevin mentioned earlier, they had it stitched up some years ago, and what's happened to the American riders in every class, really.
You know what, how all of us ended over here was just throughout our careers, support from the manufacturers in the U.S., whether it's Yamaha, whether it was Suzuki, whether it was Honda. That's how Nicky Hayden got there. You know, our American series is so weak right now. Not weak with competitors, but just it's got no manufacturer support besides Yamaha. And until I think the AMA goes back to being an organization that's run, that has a board of directors on it, that has each manufacturer represented, you know, something that makes good sense to everybody. I don't see our manufacturers, you know, jumping back in, even if the economy were to be boomtown like it was in 2008. I think we've seen way too many changes. There's no television coverage. I think this year's Daytona 200, which, as we all knew, was one of the supposedly greatest races in two wheels, it hadn't had TV coverage the past couple of years, and it's been a 600 race. You know, it's super bikes, it's thousands, or it's those two-stroke 700s or 750s. It's all that really cool machinery. It's the bikes that modern-day super bike that goes across the start-finish line at 210 miles an hour with the wheels out of line because it's got the back end broke loose. You know, I think instead of concerning themselves with making track safer, they're just trying to make the classes slower, and that's not the way to fix it. And rider-wise, I think we're still just as good, but we don't have that connection from the manufacturers who get you as a young kid in the U.S. and say, man, we're going to work you for a couple of years here, then we're going to send you to Europe, whether you go BSB or World Super Stock or Super Bike or Super Sport, and then step on into the GP scene. It's just, you know, there's no real avenue for an American kid to get there unless he packs up and moves to Spain and does one of the Spanish championship classes.
You started trials riding as a kid, then motocross, and then didn't, compared to what the kids are getting into road racing at these days, especially Spanish kids and Italian kids, on mini motos, metric kits, all that kind of thing, you didn't really get into road racing until reasonably old compared to what?
Very old. I was 20 before I actually rode my first road race as an amateur. So
do you think it's necessary now to be starting kids off at 5 and 6? What's your thoughts on that? Yeah, because you're always going to have, you know, I hate to use him as an example because he was a really good 125 and 250 rider, and he's actually not a bad MotoGP rider, but I like picking on Danny Pedrosa. I mean, he's riding Grand Prix when he's 16. So by the time, even if he wasn't any good until he got to ride a MotoGP bike, he knows all the tracks. He knows what the lifestyle's like. He's done it. He's lived it. He's been there before. Whereas, you know, as Americans, our class, you can't start racing professionally until you're 16, and really there's nothing else underneath that. So you spend a couple of years, and if you're really, really flash, and you only spend a couple of years in the States, and then come to Europe when you're 18, now you're already 2 full seasons behind what most Europeans are doing, and that is getting into a world championship class at 16. I mean, Scott Redding was 16 when he won his first Grand Prix, wasn't he? Yeah. So, I mean, that's where we've got to get our kids over, because the experience and the track knowledge and the lifestyle and everything about it, you have to be able to
to have been there and experienced and lived it and know what it's like in the wet, what it's like in the dry, what it's like halfway between wet and dry, what the paint's like, how slick it is, where those spots are in every racetrack. I mean, the notes, I wasn't real good about it, but the notes that I made for myself the last couple of years of my career, trying to make myself be able to go back to tracks, and instead of going through that corner and crashing and getting up going, God, that's right, there's a slick spot here that got me last year in the wet. So you can make notes for yourself and make your life a lot easier. But yeah, we've struggled recently as Americans, and hopefully we can. I think we all have some ideas of what to do. I read something the other day that Colin and Nikki think we need a Spanish CEV championship, which is I think the 600 class in America, and that's the way to make everything better. But what we need more than anything is we need our championship in the U.S. to be back to where it was, and we need manufacturer support, because it's so cost prohibitive for a kid or a family to just pack up, move to Europe, and try and go racing.
Even worse for you, because you've got to get to Europe. We're kind of on the edge of Europe, and we've got a strong national championship at the minute, and that's why you see a lot of Brits in World Superbike. I mean, they're not excelling at the minute, but I think they will in MotoGP as well. So that's it. All comes through for me, national championships. This is a bit of a political one as well. Would you want to be starting your career, if you go back, 30 years, would Kevin Schwantz want to be even trying to get into MotoGP at the minute? Do you feel sorry for the kids who are just getting in, is what I'm saying? Because I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The avenues to get there, like I just explained, are so limited. Not to say that they were great when I raced. When I got a chance, there was a Honda ride that paid, and Merkel had that. Rainey got the other Honda ride, but in '85 when I went to ride for Yosh, it was a Honda ride and a Yosh ride were the only two rides that paid. And when I say paid expenses is all they did. You got a little bit, you got a portion of the prize money. But yeah, I mean, modern era, the amount of people in, Jamie was talking about it earlier, the amount of people in BSB that are actually being paid are pretty minimal. And in America, if there's 2 or 3 or 4 guys that are getting paid, 2 of the 4 bring in sponsorship, and that's why they're getting paid. But otherwise, he wouldn't be getting paid. And it's tough to go after a job that really doesn't have much future in it right now.
Well, we're getting a bit deeper. I'm flipping. I brought the whole conversation down over there. I'm getting all flipping upset. Do you think you were involved at a time when people still knew how to have fun? You raced hard. It was more dangerous than it is now. You guys knocked yourself about. I was party to some of that. But on a Sunday night, there was a big kind of release of energy, and you all went out. You had a bit to drink. You did daft things. Do you think that was that did? I mean, for me, it did detract from the race. You still raced just as hard on Sunday, but you wanted to let your hair down on Sunday night.
Absolutely, and that's something that all you see a fight for now on Sunday night is who can get to the helicopter the quickest so they can get home. I was at Saxon Ring, and the guy took us up and showed us around, put us in the helicopter, flew us around for a little bit because I had to get back down. I said, "Why is that?" I said, "The race isn't even over yet." He says, "Oh yeah." He says, "But we got to get refueled because they're lined up. As soon as this race finishes, unless you're on the podium." There was Gibber now, and there was all these other people already had their helicopter rides lined up so they could get out and get to the airport and get home. Not us. We hung out after the Grand Prix. We downloaded with the team a little bit. Normally went and had a big dinner, hopefully a celebration dinner. If not, we went to dinner and we talked a little about what we're going to do to try and beat them the next weekend, and then we let our hair down a little bit. So it's kind of stiff around the paddock right now. It's hard to get much of an opportunity to see the guys, and maybe you didn't get to see a lot of us around the paddock, but we sure weren't first ones on the helicopter Sunday night, that's for sure.
Another question for Kevin. We're running out of time now, actually.
Jamie.
Do you think that the corporate nature now of MotoGP is actually damaging the sport?
That's it. That's what I was just asking, to be quite honest with you. That's almost the same question. Because I think it is. I actually think the characters are still there. I mean, there's no bigger character than Cal Crutchlow. I spent quite a lot of time with him. A little bit cocky, I admit that. But he's funny, and a lot of things happen around him, or did when he was in his formative years. But people are allowed to be characters like you guys are now. They're not allowed to be. It's all PR speak. You've got to say the right thing. This is where they changed it, and then showing their helmets. Okay,
I had it on the whole race. Should have got a picture of it then.
That's it.
It's definitely turned a bit more professional, and maybe that's to the demise of the sport, or at least what we used to know it as. And You know, I think Valentino's one that still does what he can to give back, and you know, with the following that he's got, it's really difficult. I read the other day that all the fans almost overran Indianapolis security trying to keep him off of him. I guess trying to get to him. So, you know, and like you said about Cal, Valentino away from the track, unbelievable, laid back, wants to go have dinner, have a few drinks. I mean, he is a genuine nice guy. You don't want to get with him on the motocross track because he gets pretty serious about his motocross as well. But yeah, I'm sure corporate sponsorship has tried to calm things down a little bit, but you know, maybe they need to realize that what a job this is, what a profession this is, and you know what, you need to let the guys be the people that they are.
I agree. To be fair, all Cal wanted to do back in the day was chat your missus up. Normally with some success in my case. Go on.
Yes, just a bit of feedback really from what you said earlier, Jim. What was it about watching Kevin race GPs and why British people were behind him and enjoyed the spectator sport? For me, I don't know if it's similar for other people, we saw a racer that wanted to win that race, that wasn't about points, that wasn't about position through the year. He was out on the track to win the race that day, and that's what made it so enjoyable.
Yeah,
and it was win or off.
Do you know what it is about British people? And I've noticed this quite a lot, and I noticed this through my career. Brits like a little bit of an underdog. They like to attach themselves to somebody who maybe hasn't got it easy. Maybe, and with Kevin, what I saw is he's only one doing anything on Suzuki, so straight away as a racer you think, well, his bike's not that good. It can't be. There's not that many. There's nobody else doing that well on it, and he's always a little bit injured because he tries that hard, he crashes a little bit, and he wants to win. And you can kind of get on board with that. And he wasn't full of shit like some of them were as well, even in those days. And that's overall. And I think it helped the fact that he liked Donington and all the throwing his helmet over. As a matter of fact,
I didn't think I'd ever get any British fans after my first British Grand Prix here. When I took Rocket Ron into the gravel in the S's. I thought, man, if I just had a shovel, I could dig a hole and just stay in this gravel and everybody leave. It'd be a lot nicer.
He's actually a local lad as well. He's only just lives up the road. I remember probably the second time he did it. I've got a guy who used to fly an aeroplane with my dad, a little private pilot, big biker. Went down to Donington to watch the GP, ends up stood in the throng when this is when you used to get 60, 70,000 people. A lot of you probably were stuck in there somewhere like I was. And Morris, this mate of my dad's, this big lad, strong lad, he stood in the crowd at Redgate, you win, chuck your RI over the fence, and he said, an ex-rugby man as well, it was a proper brawl. I mean, there were people getting gouged, clothing coming off, women getting flipping elbows in their face and screaming. And he said, but I saw it coming and I've got my arm through the chin piece. The visor's gone straight away and all the flipping air vents went off it. But he ended up clinging onto it, got a black eye, cuts, bruises, but he came home with the helmet.
It's funny because I talked to a guy last night, said it landed in the lady's hands, or if not, he'd ended up with it. So
he had the helmet.
Must have been the rugby guy that got it.
He had the helmet. You see, I've seen the helmet. It's definitely a racer's helmet. It's got the flipping screw and ear stickers on, everything. It's definitely our helmet. What's left of it, you have to say. But I think that, you know, that helped as well, didn't it? The fact that... Talk us through another famous thing, Redgate again. You've gone down, I think it was Coolant maybe, and then you've done this big dance thing. You've gone over and pulled Nick to Marshall's flag.
He was leaning on the flag, and he was watching the bikes come out of the corner. He wasn't even looking at the corner. And that's where we'd all just fallen. When I crashed, I got up like, you know, and it was 92. Yeah. So it was one of the years that I just as soon forget as a Grand Prix racer. I only won one Grand Prix, and the rest of it I was either on the ground or in the hospital or somewhere. So I fall, and I get up and I hop the tires, and I look